You're listening to the Downeast Mike podcast, the quirky little podcast from Maine. And now, your host, Downeast Mike.
Good morning, everybody. This is Downeast Mike of the Downeast Mike podcast, coming to you live from Downeast Maine, the land of blueberries, spruce trees, blueberries, and granite, and lots of water. This is Downeast Mike episode 92, news and commentary for Friday, June 9th, 2023. We have to check that date because, boy, time is just flying along. Our motto here is some of this is whimsy, some of it is true, and the interpretation of it all is entirely up to you. This is a podcast that you pass along to friends that you want to put to sleep. Some people do listen to it late at night, I guess, or when we're just getting started. Also, the Downeast Mike podcast contains no mean words, just wholesome goodness from Downeast Maine, a historical, literary, auditory candy store. And did you hear the bells on the door when you came in? That's just some jargon we throw in there to get warmed up. In the podcast today, we have stolen cars and purse thefts, simple crimes of old from June 9th, 1976. Jesse James was on a rampage on this day in 1882. I can just see the dust and the chaps and the six-shooters and the smoke flying. Unity Pond Serpent was in the news on this day in 1882. And we look at Maine Islands of Interest from 1898, some remarkable stories there. We have birthdays and a word of the day as well. Let's get to the world and international headlines to get your day started right. Two people who harassed the bison calf at National Park are being hunted by authorities. You know, when you see an animal, you're supposed to just leave it alone. Honduran president begins first visit to China since breaking off ties with Taiwan. Politics is always politics, isn't it? What else do we have that's going on internationally? Natalie Holloway suspect Vandersloot arrives in U.S. from Peru to face charges. Trump's under indictment. You probably already knew that. 18-year-old arrested for raising money for ISIS through a gift card scheme on the dark web. I don't know what kind of a story that is. 20 people injured when a Texas walkway collapses. You always have to be cautious when you're on a walkway. 5 dead, dozens believed missing after 3 shipwrecks of migrant boats off Tunisia. And another day of unhealthy air is forecast in parts of the U.S. due to Canada wildfire smoke. You know, it's really heavy down over parts of New York and New Jersey, and we were talking to some folks down there yesterday, and they were saying, oh yeah, the air quality's horrible, and you can't breathe, and it's all yellow and orange, and it's so dark outside. I'm thinking, how can they tell the difference in New York City and New Jersey? How can they tell the difference between wildfire smoke and what they see on a normal day there? Local Maine headlines: Portland nursing home sees a surge in COVID-19 cases. That's the local Maine news. Nothing else much have happened. Searsport residents aren't ready to allow cruise ships to come to port. They've got that great deep water port there, and I think the cruise ships will just kind of hang offshore. There's not a lot to do in Searsport. They could go in and buy a t-shirt maybe. I don't see much else from local Maine news, so we're going to do the right thing. Go right to our podcast headlines here. We have a birthday today a special birthday to Hayden out in the Gulf of Mexico. He turns, I think it's 33, and he's a hardworking, common man, superhero papa, and he's loved by all. Happy birthday to Hayden. We have our word of the day, parthenogenesis. And parthenos is a Greek term that means union, virgin. It's also the name of Juno and Minerva. And Parthenos was a princess of the island of Narcos, who was transformed into a goddess, and she was worshipped, blah, blah, blah. Parthenos was also a surname of Athena, where the famous temple Parthenon was dedicated to her. In later Greek, Parthenos was sometimes used as a masculine noun to denote a young unmarried man. Basically, Parthenos seems like it means everything. We're going somewhere with this story. Hang in here now. Parthenogenesis is a reproductive strategy that involves development of a female, rarely a male, sex cell without fertilization. It commonly occurs among lower plants and invertebrate animals, particularly aphids, ants, wasps, and bees, and rarely among higher vertebrates, parthenogenesis. So where this is going, I don't know why it just came to light today, but there's a story in the news about an American crocodile, a large and wide-ranging apex predator. Owing to its saltwater tolerance, the species occurs from southern U.S. to northern South America, including Venezuela and Peru. It's listed as vulnerable and at risk of extinction. I wonder how long before they come up to Maine. Anyway, where this is all going, parthenogenesis, on 17 of January 2018, a clutch of 14 eggs was discovered in the closure of an 18-year-old female American crocodile in Costa Rica. This female was obtained when it was 2, in 2002, and it remained in isolation from other crocodiles for its entire life. Of the 14 eggs laid, 7 appear to be fertile and were artificially incubated. After 3 months of incubation, the eggs had failed to hatch and were open to assess their contents. The contents of 6 eggs were not discernible, but 1 egg was found to contain a fully formed, non-viable fetus. So this was an isolated female crocodile. She laid some eggs, and 1 had a fully formed fetus inside. That is parthenogenesis, the ability to reproduce on your own. That's some pretty heavy stuff for a Friday, isn't it? Let's go on to, we have a story, our common crimes from June 9th, 1976. It's reassuring to read these crimes that are just simple offenses. They reassure us to the rhythm of life. 1 auto sustained damage Tuesday afternoon in a 2-vehicle rear-end collision in New Auburn. It involved in a 4:45 p.m. There it is again. Happens right around 4 o'clock. 1972 auto driven by Dean Parketem, 18, of Lewiston, in a 1976 hardtop operated by Luann Bellinger of Lewiston. And according to the report, the drivers were proceeding northerly on Main Street. Paquette started to make a turn into a driveway near the Progressive Bakery, and then Ms. Bellinger, driving in behind, started to apply her brakes, but her foot slipped off the brake pedal and the collision occurred. The only report of damage was to the front of the Bellinger vehicle, was estimated at $300. Neither driver was hurt, police said, and it was Patrolman Mark LaJoie that was investigating. So important that we pay attention to these old crimes in these days. Freeze 'em Pops, we have an ad here. It's got a picture of a bear, polar bear, and he's holding some Snickers Milky Way, fun size, 3 Musketeers, and I think that's Almond Joy. It's a 20-cent coupon, which was significant fund in 1976. And the ad copy reads, "Summertime is the right time to give yourself a cool treat. Put Snickers bar, Milky Way, and 3 Musketeers and Almond Bar Fun. Put them in the freezer so you have plenty on hand when the gang comes in for a cold, refreshing snack. Look for the special Freeze 'em display at your grocer's and that 20-cent coupon." I could almost picture the expression on the gang's face as you reach into the freezer and hand them a frozen snack-size Snickers bar. And we also had another crime. A 15-year-old male was charged by Lewiston police today with a theft of a purse inside SS Peter and Paul Church on Ash Street. Everything is wrong with this story. We have a 15-year-old male going into a church, stealing a purse. Authorities said the juvenile allegedly took a purse belonging to church organist Ida Rocheleau during an organ rehearsal late this morning. The organist reportedly left the organ for a few moments, and when she returned, found the purse missing and a youth fitting the description of the teenager leaving the church. Never leave your organ alone. Officer Max Osborne was credited with the quick apprehension of the youth and the recovery of the purse. He was provided a description of the teenager and located the youth a short distance outside the church. The youth was taken to police headquarters and questioned by Ashburn and school liaison officer Ed Carpenter. Boy, I would not want to be sitting across the desk from him being asked about a purse. And the youth will be called to appear in juvenile court. Police said the woman's wallet was not recovered. They're still looking for it. It's just so much history there, 1976. All right, we're going to roll it back to June 9th, 1882. The spirit of Jesse James still marches on in Missouri. On Thursday, 6 masked men robbed a bank in Brookfield in Missouri. The deed was committed in broad daylight and was one of the boldest robberies on record. It was thought by some that Frank James was one of the gang. It may become necessary for Missouri banks to keep a company of soldiers to guard their treasures. Also had a story here. A census of elephants in the United States shows the number to be just 77. The elephant population in the U.S. in 1882, 77. Barnum, P.T. Barnum, with his usual enterprise, will have 90 of these animals before the summer closes, and 4 Powell will own the remaining 60. This will leave less than 100 to be divided among the score of other greatest shows now on the road. An elephant census. Story out of Unity in Waldo County, Maine. The Belfast Age says a good deal of curiosity has been excited in Unity by what has appeared to be some kind of serpent or monster which has several times been seen in Unity Pond near the village. Once or twice he's been seen to dart from near the shore as if startled and make for the deep water, throwing the spray 30 or 40 feet into the air. A great many conjectures have been made as to what the creature is. Some have thought it to be a huge snake, others have thought it more resembled a sea porpoise, while a few have poo-pooed the idea of it being anything but a loon. Unity Pond, sea monster. Well, pond monster. The weather forecast for today, this is 1882, coming out of the War Department. That's where they had the weather coming from. For New England, it was partly cloudy, local rains, variable winds, followed by rising barometer and a slight fall in temperature. They used to cover all the bases. Basically, say partly cloudy with a chance of sun, some rain, and temperatures will be going up and down. Story out of Portland, a little before 6 Friday morning, the residents at the corner of Vaughan and Brackett Streets were startled to see a small stream of water gushing through the east side of the reservoir toward Vaughan Street. I can't picture this in my head. The stream grew rapidly larger, but culverts carried off the water until about 20 feet square of the side of the reservoir was thrown out, and an immense torrent of water rushed out and poured down Vaughan Street, washing out curbstones, small shade trees, and gullying great seams in the street. Reaching Congress Street, the flood crossed, and it went down the steep hill of Grove Street, plowing chasms 10 feet wide and carrying the paving and masonry long distances. No great damage was done to property in the neighborhood except for the streets, save that cellars were flooded and the great wave poured out. No person was injured. The break was in a place favorable to the least damage. Damage was estimated to be $5,000. Water supply will not be interrupted as direct pressure was put on before 8 o'clock. 6 million gallons of water on a break there in Portland on this day. The evening edition, strawberries were 13 cents a box. And the manager of the Edison Electric Light Company was proposing to come to Lewiston on this day, 1882, in the interest of his company. I thought that was interesting. The first night train providing Calais in all points east of Bangor with 2 mail deliveries per day arrived Thursday morning, and the businessmen of Calais expressed great satisfaction with the arrangement. It'd be fun to hear that train clacking along the tracks all the way up to Calais. We had some other news. Let's see. We have Russia reporting to have assured England that she desires no more territory in Europe. Imagine that. They were fighting over there in this day. The Russian army reported to be about to cross the Danube. A secret alliance between Russia, Germany, and Austria believed to exist. And fighting at Kristach between the Montenegrins and the Turks lasted all day, and great bravery was shown on both sides, but the Turks failed to gain any advantage, though they lost 3,000 men. Always interesting to hear about the fighting that went on back then. There were extensive forest fires. It was in the news. From Michigan, the villages of Greenwood and Capac were destroyed. Large sawmill was burned. Several other places have been destroyed. 700 persons have been turned out of their homes by these wildfires. The fires extended along Lake Huron for 40 miles. Also, Chaz Sanford's house in Keene, New Hampshire burned on Wednesday. The loss was $1,600. It is insured for $1,000. Forest fires have been raging near Halifax, Nova Scotia. What? That sounds just like today's headline. A stable and 43 horses were burned at Ottawa, Canada on Friday. And a fire in Indiantown, New Brunswick burned buildings valued at $30,000. Half of the business portion of Union, South Carolina was burned on Sunday. And then they said rain in Michigan on Tuesday quenched the forest fires. We have a story out of Downeast, Maine. Our correspondent writes, a young and mischievous predator named Ben Holt was arrested in Dexter on Friday. He's a simple-minded fellow about 21 years of age who cannot be kept at home, and he's roamed about the country as a tramp, stealing promiscuously. For thefts, a few years since, he was committed to the reform school, and he has served a short time in state's prison. He has committed a half-dozen burglaries in this vicinity lately. When arrested, he had some stolen money, a watch, and a lot of railroad tickets taken at Corunna. I know when I want to steal railroad tickets, I always go to Corunna. Simple-minded fellow. We don't have any of those today, do we? The 17-year locusts are ravaging the forest in New Jersey and Staten Island. 6 cases of smallpox have occurred in Lowell, Mass. Caterpillars abound to such an extent in Ontario, Canada, as to stop or delay the trains on the railroads. So many caterpillars. Large schools of mackerel have appeared in the Bay of Fundy. We like schools of mackerel. 2 cases of yellow fever have occurred in New York. The American Medical Association opened its session in Chicago on Tuesday. And 10,000 sheep were recently sold in California at 5 cents a head on account of the drought. Okay, let's go on to our islands of interest here. We have islands of interest. Louds Island on the coast of Maine, near historic Pemaquid. It's in the Lincoln County town of Bristol. Louds Island is one of the few places on Earth where there are no taxes. This island, otherwise known as Muscongas, was overlooked when Maine became a state and was put into no town or county. That was 1899. They didn't know what to do with it. Nobody claimed it, so they didn't have to pay taxes. And here's our Islands of Interest story. Carver's Island, near the west bank of the Georges River, is unique among its sister islands. With an area of near 400 acres, it's still quite narrow, and the Atlantic is pounding away on its seaward side each year, reducing its width and bearing the debris to extend the wide shoal which encompasses the island about. On the outer shore, 15 feet above the present ocean level, is the bed of ancient ocean that once laid 20 fathoms below the cold waters of the glacial period. I don't know how they knew this stuff. This is from 1898. The mud of this old ocean bed still smells strongly of the brine when first brought to the air, but it soon hardens to a rock-like mass enclosing shells of Testica common to the Arctic seas. Among the shells are seen the Maya truncata, still found in Hudson Bay, Buchanan Islandica, pectin, and there's another one there I can't read, an unidentified bivalve. Overlaying this interglacial ocean bed is 8 feet of gravel deposited by recurrent ice waves. We're going somewhere with this, hang in there. Scattered about on the surface of the island at irregular intervals are the accumulations of shells that usually mark locality of the prehistoric village sites. When overturned by the plow, these old refuse heaps are found to contain rude arrowheads and splinters of bone, nicely rounded and sharpened to a point. You have to wonder, how many arrowheads did they need? A large vessel of coarse red pottery was removed from the sand beneath one of the heaps. Eskimo fish spears, carved from bone and antler, are often present, and a large stone axe was secured. Mr. Warren Morse of Friendship found here a polished stone totem, rudely carved in the shape of a seabird, and while removing a large thorn tree from the banks of the island, he discovered a steel tomahawk embedded in one of the roots. You wonder how old that one was. The origin and destiny of the tribes that dwelt here, Carver's Island, Maine, before the Anglo-Saxon, have been the subject of much useless speculation. That's the way I live. But with a fair understanding of the established facts related to the subject, speculation may become an honest endeavor to extend our knowledge in the same direction. And they said the red man was, of course, the immediate predecessor of the European, but to the trained observer there are evidences of something earlier. Older and ruder weapons and utensils are discerned, and the remains of animal bones found in the old refuge heaps show a nearer approach to the Arctic fauna. Covering many of the heaps is a thick stratum soil in which great forest trees spread out their roots. This shows a considerable lapse of time since the refuse heaps received any increment, but where the humus is replaced by diluvial gravel, it indicates a vastly greater lapse of time. A small heap of this kind was found on the Damariscotta River. Beneath a deposit of gravel was a mass of decayed mussel shells, while above it was a later accumulation of oyster shells. Similar conditions were discovered in a heap on one of the islands in Muscongas Bay. From a shell heap on one of the Georges Islands, a human skull was taken of that form that is characteristic of the Turanian race. We need to know where that skull is today. The presence of the Eskimo here in the early ages would seem to be the logical result of the climatic conditions formerly prevailing here in New England. Tradition and history seem to bear this out. The Icelandic sages relate that Thorwald found in Vinland a dwarfish race whom he called scragglings. The Indians, too, had a tradition of a race of dwarfs conquered by them. This tradition, as given by Schoolcraft, has been fantastically rendered in Hiawatha. Here on Carver's Island are the ruins of several stone buildings. The largest is called the Old French House, and around this spot many articles of transatlantic origin have been found. An iron axe, a beautiful pipe with metal cover, a cross of lead, and small objects of silver were found here by the late Oliver Morris, whose family has been in possession of the island for many generations. By whom these old houses were built is not known, perhaps by the Norsemen, but there is a local tradition which ascribes the structure to the early French colonists destroyed by hostile natives. Maine, too, was the bloody battleground in the fierce international struggle for the new continent, and doubtless many incipient towns were ruthlessly swept out of existence in the merciless strife, leaving no record to tell of the deeds of those who labored and fought so bravely for homes in the unbroken wilderness far from the joyous fatherland. Boy, there's some wordiness there. Such we know is the fate of St. Saviour and Grand Pré, destroyed by the English, and Pemaquid, Sheepscot, and Damascotta, with many other towns destroyed by the French, all for the glory of kings in the name of one who forbade strife and contention among his followers. A cross, a battered utensil for the housewife's gentle art, or a rust-eaten weapon is all that is now left. Boy, that's a lot. There's some pretty heavy history to try to take in for a Friday, isn't it? But that is our podcast for today. We'll look at the weather real quick. It's the weather just hasn't been very, very summer-like. Right now it's overcast and 51 degrees. At least it's not raining. However, for today, the chance of showers and patchy fog, high reaching 63 degrees. And for tonight, 30% chance of showers, mainly before 9 p.m., otherwise mostly cloudy. For Saturday, a 40% chance of showers after 11 a.m. Highs will be about 65. And then for Sunday, finally, mostly sunny with a high near 75. Looking out the week ahead, looks like more showers and unsettled weather, and it just seems to keep rolling on. It's kind of like a long, prolonged spring here in Downeast Maine. But until next time, this is Downeast Mike wishing you and your loved ones a day that is full of grace, love, and kindness. We'll see ya. Don't feel sorry for me. I'm just a seal on the rocks in Maine. Some say I'm sick because I've got fish on my brain. Here comes the shark. Oh, he's a biter for sure. I've got faith I can swim. I can swim forevermore. sure. Oh, he's a biter for sure. But I've got faith, and I can swim further than the shore. Just a seed on the rocks. I'm not your snack. Don't worry. The dolphins have my back. I'm a seal on the rocks. Just a seal.